order. I'd like to call this
Je déclare la séance.
Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room, and I don't think we have anyone remotely. Before I continue, I'd like to ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including our interpreters. You'll also notice a QR code on the table for your reference. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of our witnesses and members here today. Please wait until I recognize you by name or ask a question directly by a member before speaking. For those participating by video conference, we don't have anyone, so I'll skip that. I'd like to remind all witnesses and committee members that anyone may ask questions in both French and English, so please have your earpieces prepared. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair, and we will try to manage the list, the clerk and I, to the best of our ability. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18th, 2025, the committee is resuming its study on food security in the face of global instability. That's right. I'd like to welcome Minister MacDonald. Thank you so much for being here today, and I know you have your team with you today. We have from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Lawrence Hanson, who's the Deputy Minister, and Tom Rosser, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister. And from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Debbie Beresford-Green, who's the Vice President. Welcome to each of you. Minister, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to see some new faces, obviously, at this committee. Once again, I want to recognize the important work of the committee. I sat on this committee for a number of years and certainly enjoyed every moment of it. And that includes your current study on food security. As you have heard many times around this table, farmers and the whole sector are facing intense geopolitical pressures right now. Your study is also very timely because it was just a week ago that we launched the first ever National Food Security Strategy. Canadian farmers and food processors are central to the strategy. They are vital to the food security of our country and our world. The National Food Security Strategy is about giving Canadians more choice, more control, and more affordable, locally produced food on the shelf. And it's about giving our farmers and food processors the tools they need to make it happen. Last year, Canadian farmers and food processors exported more than $100 billion in high-quality food to almost 200 countries around the world. We're hopefully helping them diversify those markets even further. But at the same time, we need to get more of our homegrown food into our kitchen tables right here at home. And that's what this strategy is about. Backed by a total investment of $3.2 billion, the strategy identifies key steps that will improve food access and food affordability for Canadians. The farmers I meet across the country are primed and ready to grow their markets right here at home, but they need the tools to do that. And that's why under this strategy, we will speed up the time it takes for farmers to get their hands on new products such as fertilizers and pest control technologies. This has been a long-standing competitive issue with our producers. Less red tape will help Canadian farmers to produce more food for Canadians while competing on an even playing field with producers in other countries. To ensure food security for the long term, we will make it easier for young farmers to enter the sector and take over family operations. Every time I sit down with young producers across the country, I come away even more optimistic about the future of the sector. They are the innovative ones. They are ambitious and they are passionate about the sector. But their biggest challenge is daunting startup costs of fulfilling their dreams for farming. To help them get established in farming, we are doubling the guaranteed loan limit and extending terms of the Canadian Agricultural Loans Act. We have increased the lifetime capital gains exemption to $1.25 million for qualified farm property, which will be indexed to inflation starting in 2026. And we are launching a task force to examine potential supports for intergenerational farm transfers to better reflect the structure of modern farm operations, including youth, will be at the table. To help our fruit and vegetable growers expand year-round Canadian production, we will invest $750 million in controlled environment agriculture. And we will help our food and beverage manufacturers have better access to targeted programs and new financing that supports growth at all stages so that they can innovate and grow and scale. As well, Farm Credit Canada will establish a $1 billion Agri-Food project finance fund that backs food and farming projects that can transform the industry. We will help provincially licensed food businesses get help they need to meet the federal requirements. That way, a Canadian product made in one province can more easily reach a shelf in another. Mr. Chair, Canada's first ever national food security strategy is a win for farmers and a win for Canadians. By keeping our farmers productive and competitive, we will drive new jobs, new economic opportunities, and stronger food security for Canadians. As we said last week, Mr. Speaker, more choice, more control, more Canada. Lastly, Mr. Chair, I suspect members of this committee will be pleased to hear that we have successfully established an African swine fever zoning arrangement with Japan last week. This is an important step in protecting Canada's pork sector, which consists of more than 7,000 hog producers, 31,000 farm jobs, and supports 103,000 direct, indirect, and indirect jobs across the country. With that, Mr. Chair, I would be happy now to take questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I just wanted to mention that MP Joseph is here. Welcome, Mr. Joseph, and thank you for filling in for MP Harrison. Thank you. So we'll start with the Conservatives for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. You talked about the importance of food security. We had the president of the Grain Farmers of Ontario, Jeff Harrison, here last week, and he said, you can't have food affordability if farmers can't afford to farm. One of the key things that you could have done as part of your announcement last week was to remove the 35% tariff on fertilizer imports, as Canada is the only G7 country that has that tariff. Have you asked the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister to remove that tariff, yes or no?
Well, it's not a yes or no question, because first part of your question is there is tariffs from the EU on fertilizer coming out of Russia. So part of that question I can't answer because you're not directing in the right sequence. So, and by 2028, I believe the EU is going to charge 100% tariff. So they don't want Russian fertilizer either. But back to your first part of your question, look, I've had this discussion many times with a lot of my colleagues, and Jeff, of course, was one of them actually. So we're watching this situation very closely. There's been I met with the G7 ministers last week ago.
Thanks, Minister. I know the answer to the question. The answer is that this is going to stay. But you talk about the EU, but this isn't impossible. Your government exempted tariffs on other commodities like airplane parts and cobalt from Russia. So for some reason, your government is picking winners and losers. And once again, when it comes to decisions by your government, farmers are losing. You could have asked for that tariff on fertilizer to be removed, as you have exempted other commodities like cobalt and airplane parts. Now, going on the same theme, as you talk about food security, Ontario is losing about 320 acres of farmland every year, equivalent of about 9 farm families every week as a result of development, urbanization, and those types of things. We now know that the Alto high-speed rail will impact about 500 farms just between Montreal and Ottawa. Do you know how many farms will be impacted by this high-speed rail for the entire length of the project?
Well, we had a discussion the other day on Alto, and I've been in recent contact with UCP Martin Caron. We had good discussions. I've been talking to the Transport Minister with concerns relevant to the agriculture sector in both Quebec and Ontario, and we'll continue with that. And I think part of the issue here is the lack of communication from Alto, and I think they need to do a better job of explaining the processes of what's transpired. I've been a part of a plan, what they call the Plan B at home, where we built highways through agriculture land. So I fully understand the impediments and the worry from farmers, but communication is key.
It is very concerning that you can blame Alto, but this is your project, your government's project. So I don't think you can just put this on Alto. To me, the fact that you do not know how many farms potentially are going to be impacted by this rail means that you have not been part of the consultation or part of the process within your cabinet, and that would be concerning to me that you haven't had some influence on this. Can you table with the committee on maybe your department, if they know how many farms exactly are going to be potentially impacted by this rail? That would be great if that could be tabled with the committee.
On a point of order. Point of order, Chair. Yes. I just would like to mention that we will be discussing the Alto matter, but we've already discussed it this week in committee. We agreed that we would undertake a study on it and that we would wait until we had further information from Alto about what the situation was. So really, the point of order is that I don't think it is relevant for our meeting today with the minister to ask about things that fall under the realm of Alto. On a point of order, Chair, the motion on Alto was not passed.
And I know what you're saying.
Just hold on for 1 second, folks.
I'll rephrase.
Mr. Barlow, continue.
Just to rephrase the question then, how much food production will be removed as a result of the Alto high-speed rail? That certainly would impact Canada's food sovereignty and food security. How many acres in yield production will be removed from use as a result of the high-speed rail? Do you know the answer to that?
Mr. Barlow, look, the route has not even been chosen yet, so it's very, very hard to analyze what loss of acreage or how many farms are going to be affected until the actual final route is chosen by Alto and the government.
I'll move to another topic. We had you here a few weeks ago, and we asked you about the closure of the research centers. Again, certainly goes towards food security and food sovereignty. And you said those, an answer to a question from a colleague, you said that those closures were worthwhile. Do you still believe that the closure of 7 experimental farms and research centers is a worthwhile decision?
Look, no one likes change, but I think I certainly, the closure's relevance to what we're actually doing is more on the operational side as opposed to the science side. So the science side is the important aspect that people keep talking about, and we're not doing less science. So I think appropriately, from what I've heard across the country, even through my national policy frameworks, we've had 20 cases, and people are saying we're not either doing science appropriately or we're not doing it enough. We need to do a better job in doing science.
Thanks, Minister. Well, that's interesting answer is 54% of the workforce cuts and 75% of the spending cuts in your department are coming from the Science and Innovation Research branch. So I think your answer is a little misleading to this committee. My last question, your conversations around the country, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities voted 98% to oppose the closures of these research centers. So I think you're getting a different message. But when I was in Napan at the research farm, I was told by the constituents there that your colleague, the Member of Parliament for Cumberland-Colchester, asked if she could tour the Napan experimental farm, and she was told by Ag Canada if she stepped foot on that farm, she would be arrested. Is this the directive from your department that the experimental farms are telling elected officials that they cannot come on these farms or they'll be arrested?
I've got almost 7 minutes, so I'm going to stop there and turn it over to the Conservatives. The Liberals for 6 minutes.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chair.
McDonald, yeah.
And good morning, Minister. We know that Canada and the agricultural sector, in my mind, gets overlooked sometimes. Canadian Federation of Agriculture has a goal of increasing our GDP. It's $150 billion now. 1 in 9 jobs are in agriculture. It's a significant contributor to the Canadian economy. That goal of $100 billion over 10 years to increase it to $250 billion, I think, is going to need the cooperation and support of the federal government. With the National Food Security Strategy that you released last week, what are the first concrete actions that are going to take place there? And what deliverables will we see over, let's say, the next 12 months so that farmers and processors can measure the success of the strategy?
Well, to the first part of your question, I mean, the first thing that we started working on since I became minister and I had a concern with was the regulatory impediments that farmers face each and every day. Seeds, feeds, fertilizers, innovation technology, and how slow that process works, how it puts us on an uncompetitive advantage with other countries that we trade with. I think that first and foremost, from what I'm hearing from stakeholders across the country, when you look back from 2006 to 2022, and you see that we've lost almost 2% of our GDP because of an accumulation of regulatory maybe impediments or the speed, and we've also lost about 10% of our investment over that period of time. I think that first and foremost is certainly something that we're going to do expeditiously. I think we put it right in the food security strategy that within 6 months, my good friend to the left, CFIA, will have any of the backlog completed. I think first and foremost, that's extremely important. We've already had discussions with departmental heads involved in the FSS. The Prime Minister is on the issue. He wants to see action and he wants to see results. So we're working very closely with different organizations, whether that be greenhouses, food and beverage, Federation of Agriculture. I think we're trying to do everything possible to expedite the process of the FSS. And it's been a week, but we've already had several meetings on it.
Okay, and can you update us? A lot of farmers are concerned with the price of fertilizer this spring. Can you update us on what type of role the federal government can play in an input strategy that will give us more self-reliance in fertilizer in Canada?
Well, I think, even based on my conversation with our counterparts at the G7, they're all concerned relevant to fertilizer. With this new peace agreement, hopefully it holds, the Strait of Hormuz, we've seen the price of fertilizer actually already start to drop on the markets. But we need to make sure that we isolate ourselves from some of the stuff that has happened on the geopolitical front over the past year. Look, I've had companies say to me that sell fertilizer, to say to my department that if they didn't have to buy Russian fertilizer, they wouldn't. It's about a 5% more cheaper cost, so to them it's not the end of the world, but we need to make sure that the farmers are seeing that at the farm gate as well to ensure that they're getting the best deal and getting the fertilizer when they need it.
Next question. On the African swine flu zoning that was announced just this week, is that a model that'll be transferable? Like, I lived through the BSE and the total shutdown of export of beef out of Canada. It cost the industry millions and millions and millions of dollars. So is zoning something that the federal government will be looking at in the future for animal disease and to alleviate? We can't totally, if we have an outbreak, we have to deal with it, but zoning minimizes the risk to producers.
I think certainly in any trade negotiation, it should be a point of discussion. I mean, the AFSF zoning arrangements for the pork industry, I'm told by the Pork Council of Canada that it's been ongoing for 8 years. So it's a massive win for them. I think when you look at our exports, we're nearly 70% of pork production to Japan. So I think it's extremely important in that regard, about $1.8 billion, if I remember the numbers properly. So I think it was a really important achievement. And, I give the pork producers and the Canadian Pork Council a lot of the credit. And, of course, even the embassy here in Japan was very helpful in this process, and our team as well. So it was a good day. But, yes, to your point, I think every negotiation in trade should have an influence relevant to how can we isolate a situation that could destroy a commodity in this country.
Thank you very much. And next we'll go to the block for 6 minutes. Mr. Lemire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. A few weeks ago, we were together at the Finance Committee, and you mentioned something that I found very interesting. You said that you didn't really want to see the Minister of Agri-Food and Agriculture be overly involved in research. Yet, the figures don't lie. You have a $750 million budget that has been reduced So how then can you defend the fact that you're cutting research in science and innovation in terms of the planting that's done in terms of ecological research? There are contracts, research contracts, and data that will be lost as a consequence of these cuts. What can you say to this, Minister?
Look, as I've said many times before, I believe right now we're at, there's, and I'll get these numbers right, Deputy, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was 26 scientists that are presently moving from one facility to another, to 20 what? 23, and then the two to Guelph?
That's right.
Okay. 25 scientists out of the 55?
52.
52 that were going to be cut. There's 25 that are actually moving. So, and the science is going to continue. So there's going to be operational facilities that will be shut down, but the science is going to continue.
Après plus de 6 mois, près de 6 mois après la...
6 months after the announcement of these cuts, have you got a plan to give this committee about the personnel that will be transferred? So do you have something with respect to the data and the research that will be recovered in that way through transfer?
Thanks, Chair. So we can certainly provide the numbers. I think the individual scientists and their decisions and their names and so forth, I think we'd like to respect the personal privacy of individual employees, but I can confirm that we offered 26 RES scientists or research leads to relocate. 23 of the 26 have.
Je veux vous parler
I want to speak about Alto because my Liberal colleagues this week refused to pass a motion which would reassure farmers and producers that may well have their property, their lands expropriated. So I'd like to know, what do you have to say to this? I'd like to say something here. We will be renewing our discussion on Alto within our membership here in the committee.
Je pense peut-être qu'il y a une erreur dans la traduction, mais ce que j'ai exprimé, c'est que...
They refused to pass the bill. I don't know if there was an error in the interpretation. Can there not be an opportunity for farmers to express their fears because they are looking at what could happen with this vision of Alto, where there could be a disproportionate expropriation of land that would crush farmers in that area? Certainly, you must have looked at that. You must have an idea of the line of where it would be. I know you may not have a final decision, but have you spoken to your colleague, Minister of Transport, to see that he hears the voice of the agricultural producers in that area?
Again, it's making sure that I'm in regular contact with UPA as well is important. And yes, I've spoken to the Transport Minister several times on the issue relevant to the agriculture and agriculture land to ensure, and like I said, I think we need to do a better job in communication because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think there's opportunities to rectify some of that. And I think it certainly is important. We've heard from our previous speaker on the loss of farmland in this country. So I think that has to be into consideration. And also, I've raised just recently with crop rotation among several farmers. One farmer may be interrupted by Alto and 2 other farmers may not, but it may be 3 farmers at the end of the day. And I think that has to be included in some of those discussions. So there's things like that I've raised and I'll continue to raise.
Merci de l'avoir fait.
Thank you for doing that. But when you talk about a train that is going to be crossing agricultural land and cutting it in 2 parts, it's very difficult. Now, with respect to an agreement with Mercosur, there is a great deal of fear amongst our Canadian producers about what will happen. The farming practices of those countries are not the same as ours. We are more productive. We care for the well-being of the animals involved, and that unfortunately does not exist everywhere internationally. We take great care of the products that we produce in both the markets in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada. Have you taken any measures to see that our producers will not be endangered with an agreement with Mercosur?
We've had open discussions basically with the Canadian Cattlemen Association, for example, and specifically with certain ranchers as well. And I think many of the discussions are I think moving forward in a way that everybody's starting to recognize, including the Minister of Trade, understanding the concerns of the Canadian Cattlemen Association, farmers and ranchers in this country. I think some of the answers. I had a couple of questions for Debbie this morning relevant to the inspection side of.
Sorry, Minister, we've run out of time. Yeah, sorry. We'll go to the Conservatives now for 5 minutes. Mr. Gord.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to believe that your government, Mr. Minister, it takes to heart and has as its priority agriculture. You've talked about $1 billion. Is there funding that would allow for greater or larger loans to be made to Canadian farmers? I'm saying loans. I'm not talking about gifts here. So Alto currently has an open credit card with the government of $3.9 billion to do studies. Yeah, that's Alto. It is being given that, and I could say in passing that there is more management in Alto than there are employees. So all independent specialists are talking about a $550 or $150 billion, all new money. But $1 billion that will have to be borrowed by farmers and producers. They're not getting new money from the government. They're going to have to borrow money. So, Minister, it is Alto being treated preferentially here. They're not being treated preferentially. They have 2.4% mortgage rates. The farmers, I mean. What do you think?
I believe, Jacques, your question was relevant to compensation, possibly, if I understood the translation appropriately.
Je vais continuer, Monsieur.
I will continue. Maybe it'll be a little simpler. You spoke about the cooperation between the producers, Mr. Martin Caron, you mentioned that earlier. Yes, but the Federation, the Agricultural Federation in Quebec, is against Alto, but the government is for Alto. So where is this wonderful cooperation that you're referencing? Is it with your government? Is it with the producers? And where are you situated between the two?
I think the situation becomes the communication aspect of it that I mentioned several times, is to make sure that everybody fully understands the concerns of the farmers, and I think that's where I came in to say, making sure that Martin and UPA have certainly voiced many concerns, but I want to make sure that gets to the table of Alto and the executives that are making some of these decisions. I think that's what you're asking.
Minister, are you going to closely monitor the processes? And when it comes time for expropriations, will you be signing the bottom of the page, your name, for the expropriation?
I don't believe so. I think there's a whole process, a legal process that the government follows in that regard, Jacques.
Il y a une grande responsabilité, Monsieur le ministre.
Minister, there's a lot of responsibility involved here. This is 2026. It's not the 1800s. The land at that time was far less occupied than it is today. We have a democracy here. We have C-15 in place, which gives rights to producers in cases of expropriation. The government, but they really can't do much because the government can have a 3-month notice. Point of order. I've been patient, Chairman, but we are talking here about food security, and yet the member is talking about something that isn't on the table, that hasn't yet been discussed, and I don't think that...
Mr. Gord, continue.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Food security is means the respect for those who produce the food, not just here in Canada, but when you see the dwindling number of people who want to get involved in farming, there is a responsibility involved here. You're cutting lands in half by your train. You're going to cut that land in half, and then what are you going to have? 2 separate portions. There is a system of discouraging farmers on the long term. So, Minister, what are you going to do to remedy this?
Got 5 seconds.
Jacques, we're gonna work with the farmers to the best of my ability and communication.
Thank
It's gonna
you.
be key.
Thank you. We'll go to the Liberals now for 5 minutes. MP Dandurand.
Je vais laisser mon collègue, Monsieur.
Mr. Connors will be able to begin, and I'll split my time with him, and then I'll continue afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, for coming out today to answer some questions. Just a few months ago, we were in my riding of Avalon in Newfoundland and Labrador and visited some local producers from the area. And as we heard from them, food security in our province is somewhat unique because we depend so much to bring produce and that to our island. We only produce roughly 20% of what we consume. Can you tell us how the food security strategy will support the agricultural industry in the province, in my province, and food security in my province?
Well, look, Newfoundland is unique in some ways as a distinct province, but also northern communities are very similar to Newfoundland. So it's something that we're focused on. And visiting your riding with the egg hatchery and the new dairy co-op. I mean, those are the types of things that may allow these individuals or those businesses to scale up with financing through the FSS to ensure that they can provide even more product to Newfoundland, but also ensuring that if there's a local hub that needs to be built somewhere in the northern part of the country that could stabilize some of the products that are being moved to those areas and maintained there longer. I think one of those food hubs would be most appropriate in northern part of Newfoundland. So there's also funding available for that as well. So it'll be interesting to see who takes advantage of that in your province, because it is a unique situation, but it's also something that needs to be or is identified in the northern communities in places like Saskatchewan and Yukon and Northwest Territories as well.
I think over the past couple of meetings, we did have some people here from Newfoundland and Labrador who are very supportive of food hubs and are quite willing to take those challenges on to develop food hubs in our province. And I'm really glad to see that their support for those. I'm going to pass over to my colleague now.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Minister, for being with us. Actually, I've been talking a lot in my writing about the new National Food Security Strategy. Very well welcome. The question that is always coming back to me, and I think you can answer it, is how will it help in our area, like direct type of money? Like in rural areas, we don't used to get money every time when the government is doing programs like that. And I think this one is really relevant. So, for example, with the food processing or the food hubs, is it possible that in a riding like mine, we get money if people have projects that we can support?
Yeah, certainly. I think, look, I mean, the whole emphasis here is be less dependent on imports. I mean, 72% of vegetables are imported in this country, 89, I think it's 89% of fruits and vegetables. So anytime we have an opportunity to provide hydroponics or greenhouses or something, or increase capacity for an existing business, and then have the storage capabilities as well, whether it's freezers, cold storage, I think that's the whole emphasis. So I think all projects are on the table, and I certainly hope communities that have some opportunities certainly put forth some very interesting projects. And creating those food hubs, back to your colleague, I think extremely important that we do as much as we can here at home. And a good example of that is Lufa Farms. They grow 90 to 95% of the product. They put together 42,000 baskets a week in Montreal. They sell at a rate lower than Costco and Walmart, and the other 5 to 10% comes from the farm gate. So the protein comes from the farm gate, or bread, or what have you. So farmers are taking advantage of that as well, and these types of companies are starting to expand. And if we can help them expand faster, then that's what government should be doing.
I have a few seconds left. Two really rapid things. First of all, abattoirs, slaughterhouses are such an important issue. So do you have something to say about it? As well as African swine fever. A lot of pork producers in my riding, where are we at with it?
Really short answer.
Abattoirs, look, we're doing everything possible to ensure that abattoirs meet, first of all, CFI regulations, and CFIA is willing to give them the gold glove service or the white glove service, whatever you want to call it, to ensure that they can scale up to that thing and then move their product from province to province or export.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Lemaire for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, there are some concerns that are top of mind for Quebecers, particularly with respect to what is happening with the Americans and the renewal of CUSMA. Can you guarantee that that remains a priority for your government, for yourself? And are there any recent developments that you can share with us?
It's certainly, I mean, the negotiations obviously are ongoing, and it's a priority. It's our biggest trading partner. We depend on them. They depend on us. We're integrated. I can't say much more about it, but it's a priority for us, and we'll continue to seek out the best possible deal for Canadians. And sometimes the rhetoric that you hear in the media is not necessarily what's taking place behind closed doors, but I think we have a pretty good trade team in place to deal with some of these issues, and so we'll go from there.
Merci.
Thank you. C30 has led the government to make changes with respect to pesticides. Even CropLife says that it gives a lot of powers, and they were very happy with that. But are they going to introduce certain pesticides that had been disallowed before, that had been set aside because of the reciprocity of standards that gives rise to fears?
I think this whole situation is, the way I look at it is, a minister of a year old, I guess, but, and I talked a little bit about the issues that I think the expedience of processes have done to Canada as a whole. And you don't have to look too far. It's seeds, feeds, fertilizers, innovation, technology. And just on the innovation side, when we look at how long the U.S. have been using drones, which are climate friendly, precision farming, less spray, we just implemented them in the last year, and the U.S. has been doing it for I don't know, 8 years, 10 years, something to that effect. So I think those are the types of things. And look, people get concerned about pesticides, and I get it, but the bottom line is we're not going to jeopardize health of Canadians with any legislation. It's not going to happen. I think we need to make sure that we have our farmers on a level playing field with other farmers in other countries. We're importing food here. We all eat apples. Apples are coming from Mexico. Apples have pesticides on them. Nobody's talking about it. So we need to keep it in perspective. I think, there are some groups out there that like to raise the red flag, but certainly those likely are the same people that are eating a bag of Macintosh apples this morning. And that's what annoys me. We're not doing anything that no other country is doing. Some of these products have been approved in other countries for 5, 6, 7 years or longer.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Mr. Epp for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, vital to food security is, of course, continued investment in research. With 54% of the cuts being to the workforce of science and innovation branch, 75% of the spending that's already been tabled here. However, you did state that the scientists are being offered relocation. Can you tell us how many are staying within the branch? Because we've had direct testimony and conversations with some that are transferring to another branch.
The deputy has been hands-on in this. We've had discussions with provinces, academias. We've been moving forward with Saskatchewan. We've had
Just a
discussions
number.
with Alberta. You want to go ahead?
So there are people that work in the science branch that are not necessarily like our research scientists, but again, the research scientists, the people that we're talking about who are leading scientific research, of the 26 that were offered relocation, 23 have moved to other research facilities in the department and therefore inside the STB branch.
Thank you. Also vital to food security is, of course, efficient access to good farmland. Farm groups are asking for more meaningful consultation, but yet the government's saying they've already been consulted. Why do they keep coming to us? Why has the UPA, OFA, NFU, CFFO, and the UCFO penned a letter asking for a pause on the Alto project?
Well, again, I mean, I'm not going to use the word premature, but from my perspective, I need to make sure that the communication from those groups are getting through to the Minister of Transport via Alto, or via the Minister of Transport to Alto. And the route has not even been penned. So there's been no conclusion relevant to that. So it's difficult to get to that next stage, but I understand the concerns of the farmers. If you lose an acre, it's a concern. So
Consultation seems to be being used as an excuse to justify a decision already made. Surely the government would commit $4 billion to a decision that's not been made.
Look, the decision is made of the project, but not necessarily the route has not been chosen. As far as I know.
You've testified to us, the committee, that farmers' concerns, if that's going to be the case, will be addressed with their farms being split up. They will get access. Can you define that? Catapults, tunnels, bridges? Has that been every 50 acres, every 25 acres?
That's exactly the discussions that are taking place, and until the route is in place, but those are the issues that I've actually raised.
So how can there be a $90 billion price tag we can have confidence in if the road hasn't been placed and we don't know how many catapults are going to be installed to transport farm equipment or livestock across the tracks?
It's a good question, but I think as most projects, they're estimates, and they either go under budget or they go over budget.
I'll gladly do an over-under with you, Mr. Minister. A report, the high-speed rail project between Quebec City, Toronto, issues and recommendations by HEC Montreal, University of Laval, and University of Waterloo, has asked the question, how many farms are being affected? Can you commit? You say like the corridor hasn't even been picked. Has your department even looked at other alternatives? Have you lobbied for far lower cost alternatives that don't?
On a point of order. Point of order, Chair. Once again, we are speaking to the Minister of Agriculture, not to the Minister of Transport. So all the questions that we have should be directed towards food sovereignty and food security.
You know, obviously, we lean on leniency and direction. However, you know, we do try to maintain some relevancy, and the member is correct. We are talking about food security here, so I'll turn it back to the member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wayne Ettinger has proposed through the OFA a number of different alternatives, far cheaper, that don't require a new corridor. Has that been discussed at all by the government?
We'll have to ask the Minister of Transport. I didn't receive anything relevant to that.
Okay, switching topics. The last time that the PMRA, now PRD, received a dollop of money, 80 to 81 million over about a 4-year period, we ended up with a transformation project, and we ended up with a citizen science panel. That was supposed to speed things up. It did not. It slowed things down. Where does the confidence from the agri-food sector come from from this last announcement of additional funds?
Well, I think you've seen it already. I think you've seen it in strychnine, point blank. I mean, it was a decision that was made by government, and I think the expediency and the priority. We're living in a different time. We don't have a choice. We need to make those decisions, and we'll continue to make them. And if I'm in this position, I'll continue to push to make them. And I think you've seen that the Minister of Health is not quite like any other Minister of Health. She's participating in agriculture and agri-food sessions all the time, and I give her kudos to that. She's certainly paying attention to it. So I think we're going in the right direction.
We'll turn it over to the Liberals now for 5 minutes. MP Mingrelli.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Minister, for being here this morning. Well, the government is involved in food security and resilience on the long term in Canada. Can you tell me what progress has been made with respect to the National Food Strategy? And more precisely, how does this strategy support the essential role of rural agriculture, like in Prescott, Cumberland, in face of the world instability?
On the National Food Strategy is creating more competition. 5 conglomerates have 75% of the business in this country. Your farmers in Prescott are dependent on what they're going to be paid by those 5 corporations. Government, what we're trying to do is create more competition. And so in doing that, giving more opportunities for those farmers to sell closer to home with predictable pricing. And I think government, we're going to do everything possible to ensure that we do that. But we'll also, there's the Competition Bureau has been invested in. So again, it's for consumers, but it's also to ensure that the farmers are getting a fair price at the farm gate. So I think there's all kinds of entities in there that should help farmers, and it's a trickle-down effect. But farmers, they supply 75% of the food and beverage in this country. So I think whatever we can do as a whole is going to have a better bottom line for our farmers.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Question in English. So in developing a national food security strategy, how will your department ensure that measures aimed at improving food security, such as increasing domestic production and supply chain resilience, are matched by concrete support for farmers facing rising input costs and ongoing market volatility?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically what we try to do is control what we can control. And I mean, it's difficult to control the Strait of Hormuz, or it's difficult to control the Ukrainian war. Climate change is another thing that farmers are certainly dealing with that, maybe we haven't seen for generations, whether it be droughts or floods or fires in some instance. So I think what this strategy is trying to do is to control what we can control, help expand our processing and production within the farming community, become less dependent on imports, and try to do as much as possible for our farmers at the farm gate so they ensure that they get a fair price for their products.
Thank you so much, Minister. That completes my questions.
Thank you very much. We're going to do a final round here. I'm actually going to go to 3, 3, and 2. So we'll start with the Conservatives. Mr. Bragdon for 3 minutes. I think you're going to split it.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. Just want to follow up in regards to the Napan Research Facility and the research facilities across the country. We have heard multiple witnesses over various committees raise the alarm bell on the closures of these research facilities. This is detrimental to food security across this country. I cannot recall one witness that supports the government's decision to bring in these closures, not from one scientist, one farmer, or community stakeholder or educator. I think if there was merits for revisiting this decision, it would be now. And I ask, Minister, have you reconsidered this decision and weighed the input that you've heard from committee testimony and from stakeholders across the country?
No, because I think basically the operational side is something that I separate out from the science side. And just on the Napan front, I think it's fair enough that there was a question asked by your colleague earlier, and I think I never got a chance to answer it, or the deputy didn't because the time ran out. But my answer is no on the operational side. The science side will continue. But deputy, if you want to fulfill that question.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief because this is a series.
It's a question about Mercosur, and we've had.
And I'll pause your time here for a second, but we do try to, if we do ask a question, to afford the same amount of time back to the witnesses. So just keep that in mind, Mr. Bonk.
I'm just going to ask a question about Mercosur. So we've had a lot of witnesses here. All the major associations representing producers in Canada have all come out very, very strongly against further access for Mercosur countries into our beef market in Canada. And they're citing concerns of lower standards when it comes to their slaughter capacity or slaughter standards in South American countries, as well as labor standards, disease concerns. We've had no inspections in those countries for 10 years. Will you today commit that the concerns of the cattle producers in Canada will be taken very seriously, and that your main job here is to protect Canadians?
Well, certainly in the health of Canadians and the health of our food supply, yes, but I'll let the CFIA talk to your inspection process.
Thank you very much for the question, and it is obviously a priority for the CFIA to make sure that we are in close collaboration with any deliberation as to new markets. We do go in and do system audits, is what we call, to make sure that the system is equivalent to that of Canada.
When was the last time you did an audit?
It depends on the country. Most recently in Paraguay in 2022. In Brazil in 2018, and again, it depends on the triggers if there is new product coming in.
We know that in Brazil, for example, they've taken over a year to report BSE in their food system. So we've had animals that potentially could have been in the food system, which, if Mercosur goes through, could end up in the Canadian food system. What would you do to protect Canadians from this happening?
Thank you. With respect to any disease in animal, we make sure that the zoning is actually reciprocal with those countries, and we have strong standards to make sure those are not imported into Canada.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we'll go to Mr. MacDonald. 3 minutes.
Thank you. Minister, in Atlantic Canada, the new food strategy is getting well received. I've had a lot of positive comments. In particular, the ability to have regional hubs again, which was the case, decades ago, but they kind of went by, the big grocers went to national distribution. But to complement those regional hubs, we're going to need investments in transportation and infrastructure. So in particular, my pet peeve is that Atlantic Canadian farmers will have continuing access to that Halifax grain elevator system so that we can export grains around the world. Do you have any update on that today for me?
Discussions have been ongoing, but I think we're in a pretty good space with the grain elevator in the Halifax port. I think there's been massive investments too in the St. John port as well. And then you have the port of Montreal and Montreal that has major investments in it. So I think it's imperative to get our products to market that we invest in transportation modes. And back to your original part of your original question in the food hubs, when you look at the Ontario terminal, I think 2 billion pounds of food passes through that on an annual basis. And if you times that by 99 cents or $1.99, it tells you the extent. And there's products coming there from your home province, which I seen there the other day. So it's extremely important that we ensure that transportation modes are accessible, reliable, and not cost constraint to our producers.
You spoke earlier about the contribution to the Competition Bureau, and I worked for many years trying to bring in the Grocery Code of Conduct with the Dairy Farmers of Canada. The big grocers came into that program, I will say, kicking and screaming. They certainly weren't receptive of it at first. So this money that's going into the Competition Bureau, I think it's better placed so that consumers will get fair prices. And I think you spoke earlier, farmers at the farm gate should get fairer prices too.
I think what you're trying to, I mean, the Competition Bureau, and I had the opportunity to sit on this committee when we brought some of the heads, the CEOs of some of these grocers before us, and I think we all know how that turned out. So, you know, I think there's certain things that they can do relatively quickly and be more forceful on. Algorithm collusion among big grocers is certainly something that needs to be addressed. There's also something in the AI strategy which will relate to agriculture on analyzing price evaluations in grocers as well. And then we have situations where big grocers are, and this has been just in the news recently, about putting covenants on surrounding areas that smaller grocers can't build in proximity to them. So it's
Thank you. That's it. Mr. Lemaire, 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, thank you very much for being with us for this exchange this morning. The national strategy for food safety includes food hubs, and I want to congratulate you on that, because that's something that's very important for my region, for the electors in my region. It will have an impact. And I want to know if there will be sums allotted for more remote areas. It is something that deals with loans, particularly with the Agricultural Loan Act and agricultural loans in Canada. Many producers are impacted by the bills that they have to give to consumers to pay, in a sense. So do you not think that ultimately the consumer is going to have to pay more for food in remote areas?
I think part of the purpose of all of this and the food hubs, your area is actually well suited for something relevant to that. I think the food hubs are basically, when you take into consideration transportation modes, the grocery stores in your riding are likely paying Loblaws or Sobeys or Metro to move their product to your community. So you're buying your product from them. They're transporting the product to that convenience store. The convenience store then has to mark up to the consumer to make sure that he's getting his 3%, 2%, 4% increase on it. So I think certainly, there's an opportunity there to lessen the price. Affordability is a big part of this, driving competition, but putting the infrastructure in place that's going to allow us to be able to do that is certainly important. Remote areas, the same as Newfoundland, Quebec, I think are extremely important. So I think, I say to you, if there's a project that we could entertain, I would love to see it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of the committee, Minister, thank you for being here, and thank you to your team for being here. And I want to, go ahead, MP Chattel.
Yeah. I just want to say this. In terms of the deadlines that we have for our study, it seems to me that some of them are tight. Can we continue to discuss in the fall what type of time frame we should have for our recommendations? If you expect to submit recommendations, we would not be able to publish the report then before we come back in the fall. So really, it's up to you. It's certainly your choice.
Oui, ben, justement.
Yes, but given that many things will be happening this summer, the recommendations are very important in the fall. I think it would be worthwhile to wait. It would look at the report to extract some recommendations, like we always do, that have been made by the witnesses. But I do think that we should wait to the fall for the consideration of the recommendations. You're entitled to submit your recommendations at any time. In terms of the adoption of the report, the other parties can also submit recommendations.
Actually agreed that June, I think was it June 26th? Was the deadline for recommendations. Are you suggesting that we move it to a later date at the end of so the only outcome of that shifts is that the report will come later?
Well, actually, the report will still be written according to and be ready, but parties can submit recommendations at any moment during the consideration process. So if the party wants to wait, but other parties can submit them as normal.
We have agreed to a deadline. We're going to stick to the deadline of June, and if they want to miss the deadline and don't submit recommendations, I think that's up to them. I don't see any reason why we need to delay this to the fall.
I think, okay, I'll turn it back to MP Chatel.
It's just quite simply to say that there should be a deadline. If some parties want to submit the recommendations by the 26th, but there should not be a deadline that's in place. That means that if you submit them later, there could be a difficulty. I just want anything after the 26th to be included in the report.
So, what would you like us to do, MP Chatel?
Ben, de 31 septembre.
September 30. September 30 as a deadline.
So the motion is that the deadline would shift from June 26th to September 30th. Okay, any debate?
Ben, Monsieur le Président, je veux quand même
Chair, I'd just like to point out some interesting facts to the Liberals. I thought that the motions where you bring in elements seem now to be retroactive in the eyes of the Liberals. It was the inverse before. But if they want to transmit their recommendations, I have to vote against it.
We've heard all the witness testimony. I don't know if you're not going to be talking to other witnesses through the summer as part of this study. And sorry, Ms. Chatel, you were the one in this winter said this was so important. We had to finish this before we rose this spring because of the BRM discussions as part of the FTP meetings. Now you're saying we should put this off until later in the fall. I'm just, I don't understand your change in an attitude on this. We've listened to the witnesses. We have the testimony. We are fine submitting our recommendations at the originally agreed upon deadline. And then hopefully we have a report prepared with recommendations when we return quickly in the fall. And we can move on to more pressing issues that I think all of us have discussed here today.
Oui, ben, je suis d'accord avec.
Yes, but I agree with my colleagues. There is a certain level of urgency, and that's why the committee decided to move. And I want to thank the members of the committee for so doing, to work on it. But if there were discussions to be held this summer, well, we Liberals would like to push the deadline back a little bit to come up with some recommendations, not to have a deadline per se. We just want to finalize our recommendations.
A motion on the floor. The motion is to move the deadline from June 26th to September 30th. I'm going to call the vote. Okay, all those in favor? This is a recorded vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Yeah.
Sorry, no, it carries.
It carries, okay. So the date has been changed to September 30th. Is there any more business? Go ahead, Mr. Lemire.
Monsieur le Président, comme la...
Chair, since we wanted to respect the witnesses like the last time, and the debate on Alto just adjourned, it might be the right moment for us to take that debate up again. We heard today that it was very relevant for producers to have the route outlined as quickly as possible. And given that, I think that we should take up the motion again. I know there were colleagues that wanted to express themselves, but the Liberal majority adjourned the debate, and perhaps now we could take it up again.
Are you asking the committee to vote on the motion we voted on, I think, the last meeting? The same motion?
No, je voudrais qu'on
Mr. Barlow's
reprenne
motion?
Je voudrais qu'on...
No, I just want us to open the debate again, take up the debate again that was adjourned.
Scheduled for 1 hour. That was our agreement here today, unless we want to go into a full meeting. But we were scheduled for the minister to be here. You want to go into a debate now about a motion?
Yes, I do.
No, I'm saying we can, but I mean, are you, you would like to go into, so what would you like to do? Let's hear the motion.
Oui. Oui, c'est exactement.
Well, that's exactly what I could do. I could give the floor to Mr. Barlow, my colleague.
Hang on for a second.
On a point of order.
We have to, if we are going to go into a longer discussion, we have to request additional time. So we will just, yeah. Hang on for 1 second. So you have the floor. Next, I have MP Chattel. Wait, he said he was going to transfer it over to you, but I mean, he can't do that.
Mon point est simple et clair, monsieur.
My point is very simple and clear. I want to reopen the debate that was adjourned at our last meeting so that we can hear the members in the committee who sought the floor, who wanted to speak on the motion.
Reopen the debate? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to reopen the debate. We can deal with that right now while you're asking if there's additional resources.
J'ai un appel au règlement.
So,
on a point of order. A point of order. I have a point of order. We already voted on the same motion. So you're going back to the same motion. We voted on the adjournment of the debate.
Hold on for a second, folks.
It's la même chose.
It's the same thing.
Across the table. It is the will. If it's the will of the committee to open up the debate, if there's a majority, then we can have that discussion today. But there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Lemire to reopen the debate, and that's what's actually on the floor right now. While we're checking for resources, that's on the floor right now. Are there any speakers to it? Mr. Barlow.
Yes, Mr. Chair. As Mr. Lemire said, we're going to have a motion to reopen the debate on the Alto motion, which we will vote on, and I will request a recorded vote on that motion. But before that, I think it's very clear from the questions that were asked today that this is a question of food security and food sovereignty, and I'm actually really quite concerned that the minister and his.
Je pense que c'est une motion.
I think this is a dilatory motion. There is no debate on a dilatory motion.
No, okay.
We'll go right into the vote then.
Recorded vote, please.
Recorded vote. Clerk.
Madame Chattel?
Non.
Mr. Connors?
No.
Madame Donturand?
No.
Monsieur Joseph?
No.
Mr. McDonald?
Nay.
Ms. Mingarelli?
No.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Mr. Bragdon?
Yes.
Mr. Abt?
Yes.
Monsieur Gourde?
Oui.
Monsieur Lemire?
En faveur.
C'est bon. Favor? Yes. You're saying, maybe I got it wrong, but I heard, what do we do in this situation?
Point of order. I was point of order.
So, point of order.
I voted nay.
Okay, so, folks, if, are you satisfied? I think if, you know, I think it's, so what do we do in this situation? I heard nay, but Mr. McDonald. Vote. If
Anyway, Mr. Chair,
maybe I heard it.
if
Okay,
if it was heard incorrectly, I did
Okay.
say nay.
Okay, so that's on the record. He's so that vote is defeated then.
Conscience is getting the best of him.
Okay. Is there any more business? Okay. Motion to adjourn? Okay. All in favor? Have a nice summer.
Merci à nos interprètes.